everyone, a very warm welcome to this exclusive mega panel discussion on the topic Talent Analytics Roadmap for 2022 and beyond. There is a lot of hype about making smart talent decisions using data. Organizations are capturing too much of data and are now sitting on huge data pools. But is it ethical to capture the data, and how do we address the privacy and security concerns? In this mega panel, we will hear from our experts on how you can plan your talent analytics roadmap for the future and how tech can help you in the same. And with great pleasure, I would like to introduce and invite our speakers for this panel. First up, we have Rohit Manucha, Chief Human Resource Officer at SIH-AGH. Rohit is a certified executive coach with 2 decades of experience in aligning organizations with their strategic agenda and managing transformation across 20 countries. He has worked extensively with board members and C-suite leaders in driving optimally sustainable organizational performance across a diverse range of sectors, covering organizations with varying ownership models and at different stages of business lifecycle. Next, we have Hesham Saad Ghamdi, Group Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Abdul, Latif, Jameel. Hesham oversees and guides the company-wide overarching digital strategy to ensure seamless integration of digital solutions. Responsible for crafting and managing various digital experience platforms, including web, digital content, mobile, process optimizing, and other digital projects throughout the organization. Next, we have Ritika, Bhandari, CHRO, Teleperformance, GCC. Ritika is a strategic and programmatic senior HR professional with strong generalist foundation and a proven track record in challenging business management and driving change in complex multicultural matrix organizations. Working in senior strategic HR role, supporting business growth and utilizing the full range of HR tools and business insights to enable business leaders to achieve and ensure efficient HR programs and a sustainable talent pipeline. And last but not the least, this session will be moderated by Dr. Adwaita Govind Menon, Senior Specialist HR, Dubai Electricity and Water Authority. Dr. Adwaita has held senior leadership positions with Human Capital Consulting at KPMG and Mercer. He successfully led HR consulting practices across geographies such as India, Middle East, and South Africa with P&L responsibilities. Thank you so much, Rohit, Hesham, Ritika, and Adwaita. Looking forward to hearing some great insights from you today. I would now like to invite Adwaita to take over and lead the discussion. Over to you, Adwaita.
Thank you, Shashi. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the participants and esteemed panelists. Let me try to set some context to this discussion. We are living in changing times. Rising inflation, devaluation of currencies, geopolitical tensions, modularization of work, innovation, and disruption, primarily in the blockchain space, and ultimately the war for qualified talent. All of them put together make this an interesting time for all of us to live in. Understanding talent, both within the organization and outside the organization, is the prerogative of HR and business leaders alike. Numbers and analysis play a huge role in our understanding of talent and the decisions that we take thereof. One of the latest Harvard studies that I looked at yesterday talks about the talent trends in 2022 and beyond that would be shaping the future for us. Some of the things that stayed with me are, in order to compete in the war for knowledge worker talent, some of the companies will shorten work week rather than increase pay, which was a very interesting finding. The second one was employee turnover will continue to increase as hybrid and remote work become the norm for knowledge workers. The third one, managerial tasks will be automated away, creating space for managers to build more human relationships with their employees. Now, if all of these were to come true, how do we look at the data that we have in front of us and prepare ourselves to take informed decisions? Our panel today for talent analytics and the roadmap 2022 and beyond consists of business leaders from HR and technology spread across the Middle East region, loved within their own organization and respected across the fraternity. Ritika, Hesham, and Rohit, I welcome you, and we shall be hearing from them shortly. We shall start with brief opening statements from our panelists. At first, I would like to request Rohit to help us define talent analytics. How do we define the broad spectrum of talent analytics? What all does it cover? Rohit, over to you.
I think that's the softball which you gave me, Adwaita. Okay, I just need to Google the answer and give it to you. Okay, it's pretty simple. Let me try to not Google it and give you a very straightforward answer. The very first stage of what analytics does is think of it from your own organizational context, and I often say this, is link it back to your own organizational maturity curve. Similarly, analytics in your organization should also follow through that maturity curve or the maturity life cycle. So think of it as 4 steps or 4 layers that you want to add. The first level is, of course, the descriptive, where you're gathering data to understand what is it that's happening in my organization, diagnostic, understanding the as is. You then work forward from it, saying, okay, so I've understood. Now what can I do with it? You then move further on it, you build on it, and you say, fine, I can understand what's happening. How can I predict the trends, the cause-effect relationship? What can I make of it? Predictive analytics. To at the same level, I've understood the prediction. I have a ball which I'm gazing into. I can tell what's going to happen or not, rather. But what if I can foretell and prevent that from happening? Or I can change the course of future, which becomes prescriptive analytics to that extent. So they are the typical 4 cycles that typically you look into when you look at analytics. And this cuts across your verticals that you have, from talent to OD to rewards to HR operations and even HR strategy from that sense.
Thank you, Rohit. Thank you so much for that brief understanding of talent analytics, which was not from Google, but from your experience. Now, may I request Hesham to help us understand how has the evolution of technology shaped the world of talent analytics? The journey from simple spreadsheets to different cutting edge tools that we see that are available within the organizations today. Hesham, if you could hear from you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and greetings, everyone, and pleasure to be here today. The change of talent analytics has been really, I would say, evolving from the last couple of years. And if you look at the solution capabilities, and specifically in HR, a couple of years ago, I mean, we started, the first thing we had the ERP system. So this is where the HR as a capability started to emerge. And then from there, we started to have the basic things from handling HR. And then we moved into more talent management. So today, actually, the move is towards AI, artificial intelligence, and the adoption of the capabilities to actually provide more insights that could be changed into actionable decisions. So this is the trend here today. Now, and specifically in the talent management, in terms of where solutions are heading, today we have very good capabilities in terms of data sets and machine learning that allows you to predict more on what are the talents available in the market and help you in a more agile way. This is probably one key area. Being agile means you're going to be faster than the usual, I would say, the usual status quo that we usually have. And this is important. From that aspect, if you look into capabilities of talent management today through analytics, you could actually reduce the time to hire. And this is something that has been increasingly rising these days. And probably without the adoption of these tools that such as advanced analytics and talent, you probably going to be having an average 70 to 80 days to hire specific talents. So this is specifically the adoption of the talent analytics allows you to speed up the process of really getting to the talent in the market, or deciding as well, should we buy talent or outsource or do a contractual basis? All of these things are opportunities with advanced talent analytics to give you a more insightful approach into handling human resources.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hesham, for that insight. Now, may I request Ritika to give her opening statement, and my request would be for Ritika to help us understand what are some of the key questions that the CEO or the CHRO ask or need to be addressed through talent analytics? And a corollary question would be that did the advent of COVID-19 actually expedite the adoption of talent analytics? If you could actually help us understand that better.
That's a very good question. Thanks for asking, and thanks, Economic Times, for having us here on this panel. When I was, thinking about talent analytics, it's actually a core between a high tech and a high touch thing. So analytics is technology based, like Rohit mentioned. There are a series and levels of analytics that you can do, and at the same time, you're dealing with people. So that high touch has to be there, because you're not looking at analytics for making a decision of business, but you're making a decision or understanding the core aspect of your business, which is the people. So some of the metrics that the talent analytics can help the business is, of course, in terms of understanding the cost of hiring people. Second is one thing that I've realized is we always look at the hiring quality and the cost per hire, but we don't realize the time and the money that we've lost in terms of fulfilling the role. So that is an important aspect to look at in talent analytics. Second is the turnover of hypos. We always look at attrition happening in the organization, but why my high performance people are looking. This is very, very key metric which both CHRO and CEOs need to look at through the talent analytics. Third is, it's not always a number of an ESAT, a percentage. It is actually the employee sentiments that one needs to look at. What are people talking about? And there are a lot of analytics tools which gauge the sentiments that people usually write in these employee satisfaction survey. Don't look at the number, look at the sentiments people are talking about. The diversity, I think we all are talking about diversity. Every CEO board meeting talks about have more diversity inclusions, but the analytics in terms of the diversity, is it across one layer or it is across layers? People are getting burnout, with the COVID time and all the kind of overtime that we've paid. These are key metrics, different metrics for both CHRO and the CEOs to look at. Very, very, very critical. But since the time the COVID happened, there are few metrics and few analytics that we at our organization, and I've heard that with my colleagues as well, is in terms of the absenteeism percentage, the rate, people, the new hire attrition, people can't gauge that which organizations they've joined. So at the early stages, people are leaving the organization. That is key metrics that happened during the COVID time. And of course, some of the analytics in regards to the hiring, we were saying why we're not fulfilling the position. But now it is the percentage of digital hiring that we've done during the COVID time. I think these are some bit of analytics that that changed during the COVID peak. I hope I was able to answer that.
Thank you, Ritika. So if I were to summarize briefly, Rohit spoke about the cycles of analytics and Hesham spoke about the applications of AI and agility from the tech perspective. Ritika, you helped us understand this space by giving us some of the key KPIs such as cost of hire, quality of hire, the turnover of hypos, and the diversity KPIs as well. These things are relevant from a talent perspective. Now, moving on to the next thread for our discussion, which is around while the implementation of talent analytics, what is the role that privacy plays? So, for example, with plenty of data available, how do we use the data in an ethical and uncompromising way, which has primarily been the concern of organizations, both in the private and public sector within the region? Do we use an on-premise solution versus a cloud? At least that's what we face in the government entities. If you use cloud, whether it is private cloud versus public cloud, do we use real data or synthetic data for our forecasting? These are some of the preliminary questions that come to our mind. So to start with, I would request Ritika and Rohit for you to help us understand what are some of the privacy concerns that you have seen within your own organization and organizations outside that you have interacted with. Are there any concerns which are specific to the region as well? So two questions, some of the concerns that you have seen, and are some of these concerns specific to the region?
So let me just twist your question on a bit and answer that a bit. So is The privacy important when it comes to employee data? The answer, of course, to that is a resounding yes. It's extremely important from an individual standpoint. And this is where you need to put yourself from an employee experience perspective onto the employee's shoes and ask, am I comfortable with the way my data is being handled? And if it is being handled a particular way, do I trust the organization to continue ensuring that my privacy is being maintained? The element which somewhere I kind of miss out on is imagine if you're an employee who's working extremely well in an organization and you move from company A to company B. Historically, your data is lost out. Your entire years of work experience ends up becoming just that 1 or 2 or 3 pages CV. And all the projects that you've done, everything that you've done disappears. And irony is lost on me when people actually go sit for an interview and are asked, tell me something that is not in your CV. So the interesting element about analytics here is, and that's the ethics of data capturing, is should we then crawl the data and ensure continuity of employee information across even post-employment and have one repository? Probably that's a great business for some startups to consider. I should have trademarked this idea or patented this idea beforehand in retrospect. But coming back to your initial question, is data sacrosanct? Is data something which is extremely important from a privacy standpoint? Yes, it is. Now, let me give you another example. Imagine you're doing job evaluation in any organization where you come from a consulting background yourself. The first thing we often do when we do job evaluation analytics around it, we say, don't look at the individual, look at the role. What do people do? They look at the individual, right? You look at employee engagement. You say, to know hive of the data, I don't want to look at it at an individual level. What do people do when you sit through with managers? They're like, who said this? The interesting thing over here is even though we may want to ensure privacy at many points of time, can be potentially misused. I'm not saying it should be. And hence privacy becomes important. The element about that is you need to figure out how your data warehouse is working in terms of data capturing, data retrieval, and the analysis that you draw out of it, which then comes to your concept of whether you should then host it on cloud, on site, which are another different things which are governed by the legal entities which govern you. From our case, it's relatively simple. You can host it on cloud for ourselves, as long as we have a proper retrieval mechanism and a mechanism to destroy that data after a point of time. Of course, that also ensures that whatever data you're storing, you're doing it with the employee in the know that such data is being captured, whether that's through an employee survey, a sentiment analysis, or their participation in the entire employment history of the organization. The analytics that you drive out of it, I do believe to a very large extent, has to be based on real-time data. You may look at different elements where you can add synthetic data to ensure confidentiality. However, your base needs to be based on real-time data. Hence, for me, your data collection points need to be sacrosanct. Data analytics frameworks is built on that. If you've compromised the point and you've looked at simple situations like point-in-time data collection, which typically most of the employee engagement servers end up becoming, you compromise the end result or the outcome thereof. So all in all, is privacy important? Yes. Should organizations do enough in terms of complying with it? Hell yeah. Ritika, over to you.
No, that's very, very good insights. And Rohit, actually, you touched upon a lot of points. Let me first take the question what Adwaita was saying in terms of cloud. Yes, for us, it is actually helped us a lot to have a cloud-based people management system to keep our data completely private. And of course, it's hosted in the country just basis the laws that we have. Second is a lot of communication around the privacy consent, the data security part of it, because this time, with people working from home, that your data could be everywhere. You can't do a lot of controls. Your data is everywhere. The only thought and the only thing that you could drive is a lot of communication and a lot of awareness that the data has to be private and it is very confidential. Third aspect in terms of a synthetic or a real data is yes, when the assumptions and the basis the data is of course on real concrete data of your organization, but the way you play it around when you are doing very sensitive kind of discussion is you play it around with a sensitive or a synthetic data around it. You cannot just make a mention of names or real-time data. So that is something that where you could use a lot of synthetic data that one could use at. The third aspect in terms of data secrecy is there are a lot of tools available in the market to keep your data secure, be it, bring your own device also has a lot of IT security built in, that the data can be shared across the files. So a lot of that has actually and I've seen a lot of organization investing in that bit of it. So I think COVID has helped, or work from home has helped organizations to look at secrecy and data security in a big way. One last point to what Rohit was mentioning is, you do a project and you've left the organization, it's just, lying there. Somebody really needs to think about it. Very, very good business or a startup to begin with that. But there's one thing that we've done is, uh, throughout your career, whatever documents that you may have collected, your certifications, all of that, even when you leave the organization, that is on our tool and you have a link to that one. So a person can take back his achievements rather than collating it somewhere and forgotten, or it's in a CV. But
It's a beautiful idea, actually, Ritika. It's very good for even alumni network and building on that and ensuring that. I just want to make one point to what Ritika said in terms of synthetic data utilization. I think that was a brilliant point that she made. Let me give an example of how this comes out in real life. So let's say you do a culture survey in your organization. Rather than actually talking about data cuts by saying this amount of population, this age group feels this way, this gender. No, you just talk about personas. You build an artificial persona and you talk about an individual with a family of two. You build a storyline around it. It's very similar to what typically you would see marketing concepts being built around. You're seeing a lot of those marketing elements coming over here when you look at market data rather than talking about the individual consumer. They build a consumer persona and then they build a brand identity. It's very similar how in HR you use synthetic data and then you build this individual employee identity and then you move towards it. So the persona is a great example of how real data merges with synthetic data.
very, very good example, Rohit, that you touched upon. I mean, the best example that in HR one could think about. Good one. Yes.
Thank you, Rohit and Ritika. And the thought that comes to my mind is the presence of data vaults. So I know back in India and some of the other countries, now all your education data is actually available in data vaults. Now within organizations also it's also accessible. So when an employee actually moves from one organization to another organization, what is not private to the organization can actually be provided, the access can be provided to others. And with the advent of blockchain technologies and data being immutable, I think at the click of a button, it's a question of how do you structure it, where do you give the permission, and to what extent. And I think the entire employee history, I mean, it finds its application not just at the workspace, but within the healthcare space, within the supply chain space, and most of these spaces. And I think we find this change and this revolution happening right in front of our eyes at a very rapid pace as we speak. Now, Hesham actually comes from the technology side and he brings an insight that is, from a technology perspective, very valuable. Our question to Hesham as a continuation to this conversation would be, what are some of the ways that organizations are actually addressing these privacy and data secrecy concerns while implementing the analytics solutions in the people space? Could you help us with some examples, Hesham, and let us know what are the different ways to address it?
Yes, thank you very much. And was very insightful to hear the previous discussion about the privacy of data. This is something is becoming, I would call it a challenge for organizations today. And it's a necessity as well. It's not something that we should not have. You think about your own individual, okay? If data has been used by X number of companies, you wouldn't be happy. But when we think about this from organization point of view, then we have to use plenty of data to make a use case for machine learning or any kind of data program. So the challenge is actually the balance between providing the necessary levels of data privacy for individuals and allowing organizations on the other side for data enablement, okay? Now this is, you could see an example of China, where you have fewer restriction on data privacy. So you could see China leading on artificial intelligence in terms of capabilities and the usage of AI. And why? Because they don't have that much of restrictions on data versus Europe. I mean, GDPR talks by itself. It's all about restrictions. You cannot do anything, and then you end up with almost impossible cases to really implement AI. specifically in Saudi Arabia, we just recently launched new regulations. It's called SADAYA, which stands for Saudi Arabia Data and AI Authority. And here, there's high ambitions for digitalization and AI. So we're trying to actually strike the balance between what can be shared and what can be limited. In fact, in September, and we're dealing with this now today for our customers, we have a set of regulations softer than the GDPR, but it has its own implications. And it's still being planned to be launched by next year, March. There's a little bit flexibility, but we still summarize it in the rights of the customer, okay? And similar to HR, so there's the right to consent. However, when this comes to HR, your employer, you have to consent. There's no exit from this point. The right to access data, the right to know what data you're accessing, the right of destruction of data, in which again you have retention policy you have to be mindful to. So there's a mix and balance between enable data and limitation of what data can be enabled, and it's a continuous battle. I wouldn't say it's gonna end. So the more you restrict data, the more you provide governance on data, the more limitation of data use cases that you could use, the more you enable the usage of data with proper data. There are many tools. We call them sometimes data masking. We could call them data trimming of data. There's options here. When you want to manage the data, you use data marks to really do the necessary, protect the customer or employee data, and get the outcomes as they are. And this is where I think organizations are trying to really be heading in this area. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hesham. That was very, very insightful. Now let me play a talk show host and ask you some rapid fire questions. So, few questions to each one of you, and I'd request each one of you to briefly answer those questions. We will start in this order. So ladies first. So Ritika, first we'll go to you, and then we'll follow it up with Hesham, and then Rohit. The same question holds for you. Which talent analytics tool that you have used in your work till date that has been of great value to your organization, and which functional area within HR does it address? Ritika.
Okay, so actually for us, we're very, very fortunate that 2 years back during the COVID time, we actually looked at a cloud-based HR solution, 100% customized to our needs. So from our hiring to exit to LMS to performance management, it's pretty much linked. And it's linked to quite real-time data analytics tools. So whatever is happening in the organization, it throws in a lot of real-time reports enabled on an app as well. So I think that is something that is that's worked very well.
No promotion, but can you give us a name? Because I know the audiences will be excited.
No, it's copyright to Teleperformance. So that is the Teleperformance HR tool.
I'm playing the typical host, ain't I? Hesham, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've been working with use cases, to be honest, and the approach we take in the organization is validate a use case. If it makes sense, then go invest. So we've been trying with tools, but one challenge I would just make, I would think most of the organization have, if you don't have the right profiling, data of HR, employee, and then it's cleansed as well, it's not an easy thing, okay? You're gonna face challenges. Plus, if business are not fulfilling their future jobs and making it available for you, there's no prediction to be done over here. So these are things we could see. The tool comes at a later stage. You have to reshuffle the organization to be capable, okay, in terms of talent capability. If they are, and we're talking about a huge group level, but the thing, when you get the hiring or the request for talent, it actually comes at a very, very late stage. And this is where the challenge comes. So business don't put the focus on upfront what talent is required, at least in the next 6 months to 1 year. they just, well, we need to hire someone now. And this is the challenge that you end up with. So I would say, look into the process, okay, before jumping on the tool.
Rohit, your thoughts?
I love what Hesham said. In fact, I fully agree with, and I think I started off by saying the same thing. It depends on the organizational maturity. And tool, as the name itself suggests, is useful only if it's in the hands of somebody who knows how to use it, right, at the end of the day. So it'll only get you so far, ensuring that you have the right set of capabilities in your organization. A Microsoft Excel can do a great job too, right? And I think that's universal for most of the organizations. But adding to that, there are a few tools, without plugging any of them, which rather few organizations who are coming up with new approaches, which I'm really interested in, I'm watching closely. One is, of course, something that I spoke about just 48 hours ago on the atomic skills and atomic role concept, which talks about looking at L&D, reframing that entirely into a framework where it says, rather than talking at designation level, like head of marketing, it varies from company to company. If you break it up into a chief marketing officer, it could be very different from a Unilever to probably a Ball corporations or versus a Google. So when you break it up into the finer nuances at an atomic level, do these skills make sense? So designations, do away with them, look at roles at the atomic level, look at skills at the atomic level, and marrying them together to arrive at the right skill mapping, then the proper career journey, and then you can have crawlers set out to get open source information on the entire learning mapping to take you to output-based L&D versus looking at the basics of few hours of training and few people. That's one on L&D. On rewards, there's something that we've done in-house itself, is automating the entire job evaluation concept on the principles of knowledge, accountability, and problem solving, and how that becomes extremely effective to now enabling a proper individual job mapping. Because come to think of it, when you hire individuals, you hire them for the knowledge, you hire them for the experience, which is the application of that knowledge, and then the accountability, which is the job size in terms of financial or non-financial that they would do. So marrying the entire thing from job evaluation to job family modeling to job analysis to individual level, that all framework which we built in-house works very well for us to identify the right kind of caliber for our roles. To the fact that you can define your own roles rather than actually looking at preset nominations, which again feeds very well into the L&D framework that we try to work on. So again, it's not just the tool, but the application of the tool, which I would really support what Hesham had to say.
Lovely. So my next question, I'm going to tweak that a bit. So if I could ask each one of you to name one of the tool or one of the developments within the talent analytics space that you're personally excited about, and why so? If you look at the entire spectrum of the things that are available and the new things that are coming up, what is it that excites you, Ritika?
I think at least for us, we've moved a lot on, AI bit of it, ML based of it. So I would want to look at talent analytics tools, which talk about all those bit and combined bit as well. At least the ones that we have, I haven't explored which tool I want to go with, but I think the current tool customize it a bit. To make a more of AI enabled. Of course, everybody, all organizations have AI enabled in recruitment, in chatbots, all of that. But beyond that, I would want to see beyond that is something that I'm quite excited to know.
Sure. Hesham, your take on it.
Yeah, what we're looking at actually is today we're depending highly on the outsource of recruitment. Okay, now this is something I would use and capitalize on their capabilities in terms of analytics, because they have today I could say they have a pool of capabilities. Okay, and if I'm interested to invest, I would do this with organizations, because what I expect, I don't have to buy a tool, but I have to buy a specific service order with a recruitment or agency in which they invest broadly in these kind of tools. It's about today, to be honest, in my own experience as the head of data and analytics, is that there's no one service shop or recruitment agency has your talent. Okay, you're gonna find one talent here, you're gonna find 10 in other locations. Today, with in fact today, which is a blessing of COVID, is the virtual worker. This is something happening already. We have many of our colleagues are working virtually with us. Okay, it's working perfectly as long as you have a good time zone between you and the colleagues. The challenge comes if they are far extreme time zone. This is not an easy area unless they're doing something not depending on being accessible. So I would rely a lot on agency, and we get a lot of capabilities from them in this area. And it's what we could see is that with the interconnected data of network of these talents, this is where you could really flourish opportunities over here.
Thank you, Hesham. Rohit.
Right. So since we're sticking to analytics, I'm not going to touch upon the meta work conditions and a couple of other topics, because that will take the conversation off topic. So I'm going to break it up into 4 components. So the first challenge which I expect any tool to solve is to make things more effective, from a talent acquisition to talent development management. That's my talent vertical. I think the funnel of talent acquisition is largely broken because historically we felt that the talent has never been adequate. But more honestly, if you look into it, you realize the organization's definition of the talent requirement in itself is more or less than adequate. Hence, identifying the right definition of roles, allowing individuals to type in the kind of skills that they have and how that could then feed into an organizational context, and that marriage happens effectively, that's a wonderful space where you see a lot of players coming into play. Then you move further into organization structuring. Historically, again, we as organizations have gone through cycles of change. They've gone through hiring and firing. The Great Resignation, prior to that was the Great Termination, and now you have the Great Retention. The historical association of all of that is the fact that we've not been good at predicting, forget about prescriptive analytics. And we've had historically a lot of data to look at how organization life cycle changes should be affected into workforce management. Now that doesn't happen really well. So there are a few good players who've now started operating in that space to look at prescriptive analytics, looking into account your PESTLE, your SWOT, the basics of it, create your own organizational strategic objectives and how that plays into your organization structure and hence your headcount requirement, and ensuring you don't have to go through cycles of workforce optimization. So that's another good space which I'm excited about. Then let's talk about rewards. I think historically the job evaluation system, point factor or not, has been to a very large extent living its life, or rather on its deathbed, constantly revived based on requirements. Yes. So, and of course, it's been abused, misused, misunderstood, overcomplicated. The thing is, you're seeing a lot of organizations go back to the basics and defining jobs simply, coming back to my first point on the talent spectrum, which allows you to then redefine compensation structures more openly and giving us the flexibility of redefining compensation in a manner which suits the individual, rather than looking at things from a budgeting standpoint or an accrual or amortization schedule standpoint. To the same time, by looking at a larger aspect as to how come daily wage is very different from monthly payment salaries if I was to get money on a daily basis. It's redefining the entire compensation spectrum and analysis around how human behavior is capturing compensation. So even your definitions of LTIP versus STIP and how those schemes are being panned out is changing. So a lot of good work happening on the reward space, which then brings me to the last space of the employee engagement, employee experience, design thinking, because a lot of that is rested on this. I think the starting point, or rather the beauty point about all of this, is to do with the fact that employees are to a very large extent now expecting decentralization of decision making happening, because this is the era of knowledge economy. Hence, while employees, as we've all, as Hesham very rightly said, you're with an employer, you literally sign off your rights by saying, of course, you can have my data. But at the same time, what do you do with that data? Employees are questioning the organization and they're expecting the organization to do something with that data. And I think that's where the analytics framework is coming into play, by saying you've been capturing data on me, you've done these surveys. Now, don't ask me to sit through another focus group discussion, but tell me what the outcome is of it. And I think that's where organizations are being held accountable by the employees, by saying, now what next? You've analyzed everything, where's it going? And I don't want to plug any players because I think that would not be fair. But again, there are a lot of stuff happening at the atomic level to simplify skills, simplify roles, and then hasten the speed and not keep us in this spectrum of constant analysis paralysis. Like I said, it's great to have tools, but they're useless if you don't know how to use them.
True. So with the paucity of time, what I would request right now is if each one of you could actually give a brief 30-second summary take of yours around talent analytics and the way forward. So Hesham, will start with you. A very, very brief take on what the future looks like.
Thank you very much. Pleasure being hosted here today. I would think about really the talent is prepare the good setup from organization perspective, profiles, data, and having this really prepared, will be able to really get a good in-sourcing opportunity and using advanced analytics in talent and hiring.
Thank you, Hesham. Rohit.
Okay, so I'm going to be a bit bleak. Yeah, I'm going to keep it short. So the future is going to make so what's typically happening in organizations are different planes in terms of maturity. Now, with the current space of change which is happening, there are organizations which are redefining that change, and there are organizations which are lagging. The pace at which the laggards are falling back is increasing. So technology is kind of enabling that gap to widen. While we all have the same level playing field, the organizational maturity and the capabilities that they have are not enough for them to bridge this gap. And I don't want to sound negative, but the reality is that, yes, to a very large extent, the gap between the organizations which have figured it out and the ones which haven't is actually widening. And I would love to see that reduce with organizations leveraging a lot more on gig workforce now that that's opening up. And a lot of countries like UAE has opened the floodgates for that, which is the wise thing to do. And I think a lot of countries need to now emulate those legal elements and ensure that now companies can bridge that. I think that will be important for you to see major benefits coming your way out of this new change.
True. Ritika, your take.
Good examples that both Hesham and Rohit gave, and good insights. But two things that I want to emphasize and leave today's conversation is one is, don't look at analytics at a silent zone. Always look at what the organization, what your operations business want, and the people want. All of that, marry it together, and then look at analytics. Just don't look at data, but look at something which will beneficial all three. When you were talking about the dream talent analytics tool, I would want a tool which talks about all three specifically, so that each one looks at the data in their own zone but makes the right decision. And second one, though it's not relevant to analytics, but it's very relevant to tools that we use. There's some phrase that we use as bots don't cry. So what I meant by saying that, it is, you can have analytics, you can have a lot of technology, you can have AI, everything, but human is a human at the end of it. So we should use those tools, but look at people and talent in a different way. So I say, bots don't cry. Look at data relevant for your biggest asset in the organization.
Thank you, Ritika. Thank you, Rohit. Thank you, Sham. To summarize, I would say we want our data to be sacrosanct, the tools to be fit for purpose, and from a technology perspective, we want it to be scalable and secure, and my personal preference for it to be decentralized. If we were to achieve this, we possibly have a very bright future for the talent world and the HR workspaces that we have in the future. Thank you so much, everyone, for agreeing to join in out here, and thank you for this opportunity to moderate this conversation. Thank you, Shashi and the Economic Times Group. That would be it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all our panelists for such an engaging discussion. And thank you, Adwaita, for moderating it so well. There was so much to learn from each one of you. Thank you so much. I would request our audience to let us know your wow moments from the session on social media using the hashtag #ETHRNextTechME. And that concludes this session. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Coming up next is a keynote on top 6 big things that the CIO and CHRO need to get right by Brian Sommer, HR tech expert and founder president, TechVentive. So stay tuned. Thank you.